Gulfstream Legal's Poolside February 2023 webinar, Avoid the Traps and Escape the Maze of Document Review. I'm Ari Mandel. I'm a VP of Discovery Services at Gulfstream Legal, and thank you so much for joining me today as I discuss what has become a very interesting topic for us here at Gulfstream Legal here in the both the recent past as well as the past couple of years. So let's kind of dive right into this interesting subject. And we are going to be focusing today on how active learning can improve eDiscovery review efficiency. So I'm not going to read everything off of this screen, but I do have some slides that you'll see see in the background as we continue to discuss this subject. But I do want to start with some baseline. What is active learning? So when we're talking about active learning today, we are specifically talking about Relativity's assisted review tool that'll help you to categorize your document and automate your review process. Here at Gulfstream Legal, we utilize active learning, believe it or not, in about 90% of our cases that we have handled as part of a managed review process over the past 24 months. The reason we have found this is one of the reasons we're going to be discussing today. And please, as we start to talk about active learning, I do highly encourage you ask any questions that you may have along the way. I will do my best to answer those as we come. And again, please, I love to make this as interactive as possible, especially since today, unlike most times, I am by myself. So let's get into this subject. To begin, active learning has two different forms of this. One is the prioritized review. So prioritized review is one of the most popular versions of active learning. And why is this? It is because active review feeds documents directly to the reviewer that are higher ranked or more likely to be responsive for reviewers to code first. So what does this mean? So you have to remember in active review, a review team is not using a traditional batch system that we all grew up kind of learning as part of a traditional linear review. And I will display and demo this a little later on. But if you can imagine a reviewer logging into your system and having a button that literally says start review. And every time they make a coding decision, they get fed another document. And every single time they make a decision on that document, it is continuing to train the system in the background automatically. This is not something where a project manager, a data analyst is doing any work in real time in the background. This is the active system learning with each and every call your reviewers make. So the nice thing is the further into review you get, the more likely you are to see higher and higher responsive ranked documents. Now, the other type of review that we talk about on a regular basis is a coverage review. A coverage review, as compared to a prioritized review, does just kind of the opposite. It is feeding you both highly ranked and lowly ranked documents. Now, you'll hear me use this term a couple of times across this 30 minutes. High-ranked documents referred to documents that are likely seen as responsive. Low-ranked documents are documents that are seen as highly likely to be non-responsive. Everything that's kind of in that middle area, or as we like to call it, the gray area, are those documents that are in the middle that the system is not able to classify yet. So we talk about these two different types of review because it depends upon what your purpose is for this type of review, how many documents you have to review, and how quickly you have to get to production. We like to talk about prioritized review being that type of review that you're going to conduct when you're trying to get out of production as quickly as possible of some set of documents. It's a great way because you're going to very quickly see those highly likely to be responsive documents very quickly as part of your review. And even more importantly, as part of that process, you're going to get a responsive set that can have some final calls made on it very quickly. Now, as we've talked about these couple of types of review, let's also kind of talk about how your active review looks. And this is one of the most important things that you really want to understand when talking about active learning. And I promise I'm not going through every single step here, but I'm going to go through a couple of the gotchas. Couple of your key points here is how you actually kick off your active review set. You don't just take every document and say, hey, let's categorize these and start reviewing. There is work that you want either your project management team or your setup team to conduct prior to kicking off an active review, such as email threading. For all Gulfstream legal active reviews, email threading is always run. And why is that? We're quickly able to identify additional duplicates in your data set, so you can eliminate those as part of your actual review process. When available, you apply search terms. That way, it is our preferred scoping method, but it will help you again filter down that data set. And this is where we get into the more particular parts of active learning setup, which is removing large and non-text documents. And here is one of the key terms that people forget when starting off an active review: non-text documents. What do we mean by a non-text document? Well, it's not just system files that might have garbled text that's in there, but sometimes images actually have a just minute amount of text that most processing applications will identify. Is that true text for the document? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. So you need to be able to identify which text documents are actually documents and which documents are non-text images. This is important because the content of your document will determine how well the system is able to classify. And being able to remove those documents prior to starting a review itself will make your process that much more successful. Again, at that point, once you've got your core set identified and removed, we create an initial safe search and we get right into this. Now, again, we like to say, hey, what are we going to do? In our work process, we actually utilize both forms of active learning types. The two types we just talked about: a prioritized review and a coverage review. Why is that? Because a coverage review is a great way to actually get through a large set enough to test the richness. Now, this is a term that most people have a little bit of a trouble with, is the term richness. What is the richness? The richness is the percentage of relevant documents across the whole sample. Now, why is this actually important? Our richness is going to determine how well we can identify those documents in our population. There's a few different ways that we can actually test our richness. And one of those ways is being able to feed the system what you see as the sample of the prioritized review, 5 positive and 5 negative samples. These items are critical to being able to identify how rich your document set is and how successful this process is. And this gets into the importance that we're going to discuss a little later as well, which is, why is it important to have an expert as part of this process? An expert's going to be able to guide you through this process, both the setup, the kickoff, and the initiation of this process, so that you can actually get to your review as quickly as possible. Your expert is also going to do the number one most important thing once you start your review, which is monitoring for anomalies. Again, we talked about the image documents. Image documents can get into your data set, and they need to be monitored to see if your team is finding them and quickly remove them. The other big example, and my project management team always reminds me about this as part of an active review, which is undeliverable emails. These undeliverable emails come in a number of different formats. They have text, they appear to be relevant, But unless your case is actually talking about those or those are subject to that, they are totally irrelevant to your particular matter. And it can be quite critical to identify those during the monitoring phase and eliminate that. So I'm going to take two seconds here and give you guys two example projects of why we talk about active learning being such an important thing for our process. And I know I very quickly went over that overview very quickly. So please let me know if you have any questions, and I'm glad to go into any in particular step in more detail. So our first example of a real life project that happened here in the last year was a linear review. The client did not use active learning as we recommended, but actually agreed to use the linear review results to train an active learning model, something our project management team ran in the background. At the end of the linear review, those results were actually compared to what their managed review team did as part of a linear review. And we were able to demonstrate how they would have only had to review 25% of the entire population, that original data set. So imagine if you had 10,000 documents and somebody told you you only had to review 2,500 of those to get to the exact same result. What did we find this led to? Reviewer inefficiencies. And in this particular case, the reviewer cost of 80 plus hours when only 20 hours would have been required if they used active learning to get to the exact same results. Another example was one of our clients brought in a managed review team to work with our project management team, not using one of our managed review teams because of their end client requirements. This particular managed review team recommended to our client that they should not use active learning. They had to use linear review because Cal had inefficiencies and added costs, and they were adamant about the fact that if you go down this path, you will be spending more money. Very similar to the previous case that I mentioned, we got the client to agree, let us run active learning in the background to monitor the exact same process as your linear review. And at the end of it, do you and your manager review team agree to review those results with us to see and learn what we could have done better? Right away, we found out that they would have only had to review 37% of their original data set. Now, imagine this particular data set was over 500,000 documents. A note that I don't include in here. Again, linear review here led to additional reviewer inefficiencies, a cost of 300 plus hours of contract reviewer time, when only approximately 100 hours would have been required to get to the exact same results as what we saw as part of a linear review. Now we use both of these examples, not the highlight projects, not only the highlight projects that could have been run more efficiently, but also to highlight one of the things that we've noticed right now in the industry. When you're working with active learning and analytics experts, they will be able to best manage these process. We find that a lot of traditional managed review teams, not everyone, do not have the experience to run these projects and processes efficiently. And this is why we always talk about your expert. Your expert is going to make a difference in how well your process runs. And your expert is not always going to be your traditional eDiscovery project manager. Sometimes they will be the person that is, I don't want to say good enough, but they will have the experience to help you through that process. But a lot of the times you need an expert to help you actually get things set up right. So what are these experts doing for you? Well, they're going to ensure that a project manager is always there monitoring, optimizing, and making sure that your analytics index is the best it possibly can be. B, Active learning is based on the data set coded by you, and you have control over what the machine learns. Now, that is important, but your expert is going to help you figure out how do you best make the determinations on that document itself. So we all remember the old-fashioned four-corner review. We all sometimes forget that when we're doing an active learning review, we have to review based upon the content of our document itself and not the context of our document. Your expert is going to be continually monitoring the results that are of the coded documents to ensure that you're coding these documents in the most efficient manner as well, which is where we also talk about that expert project manager is working in the background while the reviewers are reviewing without having to lose time by halting the review, analyzing on a continual basis. Now, we also talk about, where this expert comes in, engaging active learning. It's going to reduce reviewer fatigue. This is a constant thing we talk about. A happier, brighter, healthier reviewer is going to make better decisions. Less human errors means you get better results in your coding decisions and more consistent decisions being made. Active learning, and this isn't as much for the expert, but we always like to note this. Active learning has also been built in to be visually appealing, bringing you statistically accurate reports to back up your project's accuracy, richness, and all the other wonderful things that give you confidence in the system that you're using itself. Now, I've gone through a lot of information very quickly for you. And before I dive into a very quick demo of how active learning looks and works, I want to ask if anybody has any questions or any experience or problems that they've had using active learning in the past. And I'll give you a second to tie in while I set up and switch over to the demo. No questions. This is a good sign, and I even like to see even more that nobody's had problems with that active learning, which is phenomenal for here. So now you should be able to see my screen. This is relativity, and we've all seen the salt versus pepper case probably in the past. If you've ever seen a demo of relativity, I like to use this particular case because it's familiar and it looks like something that you've seen in the past. The first thing that I want to note for you is the difference. So we talked earlier about how with active review, we no longer use batches. So how does a reviewer start? Now, before I tell you how a reviewer would start, it's important to note that the reviewer does not lose the functionality of seeing the documents that they in particular have coded. As you'll note, we set up this active review yesterday, and I went through and personally manually coded 213 documents to provide samples into this data set itself. I can see all of my 213 coded documents, just like I would as a traditional reviewer that would have a view set up for them that says my coded or my checked out documents. Now, the nice thing is, if I'm ready to start reviewing again, whether I see documents or not, all I have to do is click this button right here, Start Review. Start Review automatically goes in and finds the next available document, presents it to me, and allows me to start making decisions. Now I'm going to switch over to my coding pane because I have a lot of coding panes, unfortunately, in the demo database. And the nice thing about this review as well is you're making a very simple decision. For active learning, it's learning based upon categorizing documents in one of two categories: responsive and non-responsive. If you do want to include the old-fashioned further review or flag, you would actually create an additional field for somebody to be able to flag that particular note, but they would still be required to make a decision based upon the knowledge they have on the documents, whether a document is responsive or non-responsive. Now note, any two types of categories can be done. If you know you have just a responsive set and all you're doing is a privilege review, you can do the exact same thing with privileged and not privileged. And the system will automatically start to learn based upon your coding decisions what those determinations are. And as you can see, a person's going to come in here, make a determination. I know this is a non-responsive document. I'm going to select that, save and next. It's going to take me to my next document. I know this one's also non-responsive. I'll make a call on that. I'll save it, exit my view, and you'll notice that I now have 215 documents because I made 2 additional calls in my system itself. Now, the nice thing you can see, there's no batch for me to check back in if I'm not done. At any single time that I want to jump back into this review, I can say start review. And if there are additional documents to be fed to me, it's going to be there. If I as a manager or an admin have paused this review, the start button would not be there. It would let them know there are no new documents. Instead of there are new documents, it would tell the reviewer there are no new documents to review. So very simply, the reviewer has easy access to the information that they need. They also know if there's more documents for them to go. And they will also most simply don't have to worry about, that old inefficiency of, did I review all the documents in my batch or not? Now, the other nice thing about this is the ease of reporting for an active learning project. In active learning, we all wonder, well, how do we monitor all the information that's going on? And you can see there are these dashboards for your administrative group to be able to simply see, what am I doing? What have I started? And when do I need to do my next step? So I can see my original project was 4,639 documents. I can see how many documents have been coded responsive and non-responsive. I can see of those documents, how many were manually coded and how many were coded as part of my actual review itself. And the other key is how many were skipped. Now you'll note again, a person is not required to make a call on that document if they do not believe it is something that they can call. So another way that people can go about that old-fashioned further review is by skipping that document, and then those documents can be assigned either to a lead partner, a senior associate, or subject matter expert at that particular time. You can very much see right here, I am going through a prioritized review rather than a coverage review, or even doing a validation round. And I very quickly see, here is how all my documents are currently ranked. Blue meaning responsive documents, yellow meaning non-responsive, and this purple means not reviewed. And remember when we talked about earlier the low and the high ranked documents? Majority of our documents right now, because we've only started this review, are still centered around that 50% mark. Your goal as you continue to review is to slowly push those numbers so that they're out on the wings. Your goal is to have, again, depending upon the richness of your data set and the amount of documents you have, as much as possible to the far right and to the far left of the screen, and very little, if any, right in the center. So again, when we used to talk about TAR 1.0 or predictive coding, everybody used to say, well, when am I done? Well, one way you can tell if you're done is if you've reviewed all of your documents, if that's your style of review that you chose to go through. And we do have clients that use active learning to do a complete review of all their documents because they still want to look at every document. That is their requirement for the particular case. But they like this workflow because they can easily track progress and feed documents to their reviewers with little to no oversight. But the nice thing about this review, this graph as well, is it shows me my distribution of what's left, what's been categorized, and where is all of my documents. How well have I been able to categorize my documents? I have other graphs that show me things like reviewer statistics. you know, what's going on in each of my individual review phases. But most importantly, you can also see down here what's called model updates. So when I say that this system automatically learns in the background in an automated fashion, every time a model update happens, review has been conducted, and the model automatically updated to reflect more non-responsive and responsive documents based upon the calls currently made in the system itself. And folks, I hope you enjoyed today's quick overview. Today's point was to give you a very quick overview over to active learning, why it's so important, what does it look like, and why do we talk about this on a regular basis, and what you may gain out of this. I hope everybody gained a little something. If you have any questions, please at any time feel free to email myself or chat here where we still have some time. But most importantly, I want you to come with a takeaway that with the right platform, with an expert to guide you, active learning can help you get through your review in an efficient manner in a fraction of the time. It is a phenomenal piece of technology that's being implemented. And the more people we have out there using it and the more experts we have out there in the market using it, the better all of our review lives will be. Again, thank you so much for joining me today. As a quick preview, in 2 months from now, we will actually have a follow-up to the session where we will be taking a deep dive into each individual piece of it. So if you are interested in the technical aspects of this, where today is an overview, please join me in April, where I'm going to have a special guest joining me to talk about all of those specific gotchas and how active learning can be made even more efficient than what you saw today. I hope everybody enjoyed today's session. Again, thank you so much for joining me. I'm Ari Mandel. Talk soon.